This is not an easy story to tell. How did you both learn of it, and what made you want to be a part of the process and bringing it to life?
Well, I had seen the documentary when it came out, but when this project initially came into my view, I didn't put two and two together. It wasn't until I was, I think, speaking with Nick and then started to put like, this is the same story. The fact that Nick was involved and the work he had done prior to this, the quality of what he makes is wonderful, and wanting to be a part of that world, and the fact that Jan and Marianne were involved creatively and as producers felt like they had the foundation for a thing that could be really special, and wanting to explore that world, and for as much as we in the arts get a little grand about like those stories we tell making a difference, it feels like for once I actually would get to be a part of a thing that potentially could be of use or meaning to someone, and not just kind of self-inflated hot air. So I think those creatively and having a purpose is what really hooked me early on.
Well, yes to all of that. The creatives, the people involved, for me was the big thing, because I wasn't very familiar with the story yet. But seeing the names that were attached when I came in to meet Eliza, Hitman, Nick, Jake, Colin, I mean, you can't go wrong, and that really excited me. I didn't know exactly what I was getting into fully yet, of course. But as that became very clear, I think the importance and the weight of the story really landed, and became more important with each passing day I was there, honestly.
Jake, your character is obviously very hard to embody. What was sort of your preparation and like research process?
There was the initial process was somewhat sort of twofold. It's sort of specific in learning about what I could have Robert Birch told about his childhood, about his life prior to coming to Pocatello, and then also more specific research into grooming and manipulation and pedophilia, and then more sort of intangible research and like reading Lolita and sort of looking at those themes and subject matter through media and narrative things in the past, and you sort of pile all that together, and in a way you just want to have this arsenal of information and touchstones to hold on to, so that when you're actually doing the thing, you hope some of that, I think, comes through. And then ultimately there's nothing that prepared me for like meeting young Hendrix, who plays Jan in the first handful of episodes, and seeing the light in her and the joy and enthusiasm, and recognizing sort of immediately like, oh, that's what Jan has and still has. When you meet her, she still has this like effervescence to her, and that is what Robert Birch told in a lot of ways, like mutated and preyed on. And there's no like reading and documents you can look at to like, I think, prepare you for the moment where you come up against that and go like, oh, that's it. That's what it is to like pursue a child in this way. So that was my experience of like preparing to move into this.
Yeah, and like you said, that's very hard to go through. Did it sort of like mess with your head, or were you able to keep things like separate?
I was saying, a little earlier to Leo that like it felt like utilizing every tool I have as an actor, because it's both like unhealthy and ultimately not useful for me to try to think like a pedophile. Like I have zero interest in it, and I also don't think it tells this story, because as I, Jake, think about it, my brain shuts down and I feel sick and I don't want to go there. And so that if that's then what I'm bringing to my sense of this character, then I'm missing the story, because that character had none of those feelings. This character treats it like the one thing he wants in the world. And so at times there's replacing that emotionally or mentally, and then other times it's just knowing like how a camera works, and in a very external sense, like if you tip your head down and stare for too long, that's a creepy thing to do, and the camera reads it as such. Like that's a way to communicate this story free of me thinking about pursuing a child sexually, to keep myself and everyone involved safe and healthy.
Yeah. Leo, what was most important to you when portraying Gail?
Is just knowing that this happens, and especially the other side of grooming, where we might look at Gail and be upset by the choices that she was making. And I think it was very important for me to bring to life, or bring to the screen, the fact that it's not that simple. And there was, it impacts, one person, very dangerous person can impact how that ripples, and that there were layers within the family. I think it adds to the catastrophe that became of the situation.
Just like some people can look at Gail and tend to like blame her for any of those actions, it's also easy for people to look at the story as a whole and see it as being unrelatable just because of all the twists and turns, but it's really not. So what would you say to someone to sort of encourage them to watch?
At least for me, that was a big thing, and trying to find the empathy was huge. And I had a filter that I basically put everything through, and I tried to simplify it as much as possible. Everything Gail did was to protect her family and to protect the life they have. And I look at my own parents and what my mom would, I know, do to protect me, to protect her children. And I tried to go from there. And I think that I was hoping to also make that something that mothers can understand, or people in this situation can understand, that sometimes you can't see it, but it comes down to something much deeper than on the surface.
Yeah, and then Jake, sort of same question for you. What do you sort of want people to take away from the show?
I know Jan and Nick have spoken about the purpose of telling their story, of Jan's story of the Broberg family in this format, a limited series, 9 episodes, narrative format, is to try to offer the audience an understanding of what it is to be inside that community, to be in a family that is being groomed by a master manipulator. It's easy from the outside with limited time and limited facts to say, I would have known what was happening, and I would never let that happen, and I would have done this, and to point out all the errors along the way. And I think some of the telling of this story, again, in this format, is to say, well, this is what it was like in 1974 in Pocatello, Idaho, in a community that was trusting and open and vulnerable to someone with other intentions, in a religion whose like foundational elements are forgiveness and compassion, and people who were separated out and isolated through secrets and relationships with this psychopath. You're like, well, if we look at it that way, it's maybe more understandable as to how you wind up in a position where your child is taken and you don't know if you should call the police or not, as opposed to going, these are terrible parents. And then the step beyond that is to say, like, this kind of abuse and grooming and manipulation is still happening. It's not like we got to 1990 and it went away. It's like this still happens in myriad ways. And to try to offer the viewer and to kind of enter into the public conversation to say, like, this is real. Be vigilant. Understand that the majority of the people that this happens to, it's happening from someone that you know and love and trust. And it's not like the boogeyman in an alley, most, for some portion of this, these cases. So that, by way of Jan and her work in this world, is what I hope we've accomplished that, as actors. Like, I hope we're telling her story in a way that has that impact.